She had a priority boarding pass, a government ID, a quiet confidence earned through years of doing everything right. And yet, at Gate C17, they told her to step aside. Why? Because Imani Graves didn't look like she belonged in the priority lane. What the gate agent didn't know, what no one knew at that moment, was that Imani was the daughter of the man who wrote the very aviation safety protocols that airlines were supposed to follow. What happens when silence is mistaken for weakness? When dignity is denied, but not destroyed? And how far will a father go, not with rage, but with calm, calculated justice to rewrite the story for his daughter and every passenger after her? This is not just about one gate, one woman, or one flight. It's about presence. It's about power that doesn't shout, but changes everything. Stay with us, because what happened in the next 9 minutes reshaped an entire airline, and it all began at Gate C17. Like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. The lights in Terminal C shimmered faintly above the polished floor, cast in soft reflections that rippled beneath passing footsteps. It was 6:47 p.m. at Houston Monarch International, and the air buzzed with a mix of fatigue, excitement, and the quiet chaos only an international airport could orchestrate. Imani Graves walked calmly toward Gate C17, a Navy carry-on trailing behind her. Her pace was unhurried but purposeful. She'd always been early, and today was no exception. Her flight to Copenhagen on Stratus Atlantic's Flight 88 wouldn't board for another 35 minutes, but she liked to be near the gate, liked to watch the mechanics and boarding crew go through their rituals. There was something comforting about the rhythm of it. She wore black tailored joggers, a soft cream turtleneck, and a long camel wool coat. Her shoes were spotless white sneakers, her braids pulled into a loose bun behind her head, anchored by a tortoiseshell clip. No makeup beyond clear gloss and under-eye cream. Her face, calm and grounded, carried the quiet confidence of someone who had earned their space. In her hand, she held her phone. Open on the screen was her mobile boarding pass, Imani Graves. Seat 1A, first class, a gift from her parents, a gesture of pride. She took a seat near the wide window, where the dusk light slanted across the Boeing 787 parked on the tarmac. Its white body gleamed, the Stratus Atlantic logo painted like wings ready to rise. She exhaled and allowed herself a moment of stillness. This was a celebration flight. Just 2 weeks ago, she had defended her doctoral dissertation in environmental chemistry, a grueling, years-long pursuit that had nearly broken her more than once. Her mother, a high school principal in Austin, had cried on the phone when Imani passed. Her father, Victor Graves, had said in his usual quiet way, "You've earned the sky. Baby, don't forget to look out the window." And so here she was, traveling alone, not for work, not for a grant, not for a fellowship, just because she could, because she had made it. She smiled to herself. The gate area was filling quickly. A young couple wrestled with a toddler near the power outlets. A man in a suit tapped loudly on a laptop keyboard. A group of Danish students laughed softly in a huddle. Life moved forward, indifferent to individual stories. An airline staff member in a Navy vest stepped up to the podium. Stratus Atlantic Flight 88 to Copenhagen will begin pre-boarding shortly, she announced over the speaker. We'll start with our Platinum Elite members, followed by first class and business passengers. We appreciate your patience. Imani stood, smoothing her coat and adjusting the strap of her bag. She walked to the priority lane, joining a small line of travelers. In front of her was an older man with a leather briefcase and a woman wrapped in a cashmere shawl. Imani kept her distance, her eyes calm, her mind tracing mental lists, passport, phone, battery pack, travel journal. She approached the gate agent with a smile. The woman behind the podium was in her mid-50s, with ash-blonde hair pinned in a tight twist and a no-nonsense face that looked like it had survived more red eyes than sleep. Her name tag read Lynette. Imani held out her phone. "Good evening," she said warmly. "First class, seat 1A. Lynette didn't smile. Instead, her eyes dropped to the phone, then up to Imani's face, and then, deliberately, she looked her over, from her sneakers to her coat to the braids pulled back on her head. A slow scan. The moment stretched. "This line is for first class only, ma'am," Lynette said flatly. Imani blinked once. "Yes," she said, "that's me." Lynette's lips pressed into a thin line. She made no move to scan the phone. "I think you might be in the wrong group. General boarding hasn't been called yet." A beat passed. Imani tilted the phone forward slightly, the boarding pass still glowing. "It's seat 1A. I booked it through your website." "I see that," Lynette said, still not moving. "But sometimes these mobile passes glitch. It's common, especially with third-party bookings." "It wasn't a third party," Imani replied calmly. "It was booked directly through Stratus. The tickets fully confirmed." The people behind her were beginning to notice. The older man in the suit shifted, trying not to look directly, but he was listening. Lynette's voice took on a clipped, professional tone. "We've had problems with people trying to board early using screenshots." "Do you have a physical ID?" "I do," Imani said, still calm. "But I haven't seen you ask anyone else for one." "It's protocol," Lynette said sharply, "especially when something looks off." Imani felt the flicker of something stir behind her ribs. "Looks off," she repeated, gently. A second of eye contact passed between them. A breath. Unsaid things hanging in the space like fog. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside," Lynette said. "You're holding up the line." Imani glanced around. No one else was being delayed, just her. A heat rose slowly in her cheeks, not from shame from knowing, from being here before. In libraries, at security checkpoints, in interviews, that split-second pause, that flicker of doubt on someone else's face when they don't expect her to belong. She stepped aside, her head high, back against the wall. She watched the others board. No one else was questioned. No one else was asked for ID. No one else looked confused, or humiliated, or small. She exhaled through her nose. Let the wave of embarrassment roll through her and recede. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Stay calm, Imani. They want to break your stillness first. Don't give them that power." She pulled out her phone, tapped a contact labeled Dad. Her fingers hovered over the call button. Then she pressed it. The space where Imani stood wasn't marked. It wasn't a waiting area or a designated zone. It was just a sliver of carpet between the boarding gate and the wall. But in that moment, it became a spotlight, a stage, a quiet place where humiliation could settle over her like dust. She stood with her phone in one hand and her bag in the other, trying to look calm, trying not to make eye contact with the curious passengers filing past. One woman gave her a brief, sympathetic glance. Most looked away. Lynette had moved on without pause. She was smiling now, scanning other boarding passes with ease, waving passengers forward with a cheerful efficiency that seemed entirely performative. It wasn't personal anymore. It never was. And yet, it always was. Imani's fingers hovered over the screen. Her father hadn't answered yet. She stared down at the calling, text on her phone. Her reflection stared back at her in the black glass. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, sweetheart," came his voice, low and steady. "Everything all right?" There was a beat of silence. Imani swallowed. "No," she said, "they won't let me board." His voice didn't change, not even a note of alarm. "Which gate? C17. Stratus Atlantic. Flight 88. What's the name of the person at the podium, Lynette Rowe?" "I think she's the purser." "Good," Victor said. "I need you to stay exactly where you are. Do not try to argue with her again. Just wait. Do you have your ID with you in my bag? Don't pull it out unless asked. Don't offer anything else. If she speaks to you again, be polite, nothing more, and if you feel safe, record, not obviously, just audio. Can you do that for me?" "Yes," Imani whispered. "I'm heading out now. I'll take care of this." She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Thanks, Dad." He paused. "You okay? I think so. I'll be there soon." He hung up. Imani lowered the phone. Her thumb moved with muscle memory, opening her voice recorder and hitting record. She placed the phone gently in the side pocket of her tote. Microphone up, screen dark. Then she waited. Passengers continued boarding. She watched a family of 4 step up with bulging carry-ons, none of which were questioned. A woman in a business suit scanned her pass, received a warm nod, and stepped through without pause. No one else was asked for ID. No one else was told their pass didn't scan. No one else was told they didn't belong. Imani shifted her weight. Her shoulder ached from the strap of her bag. The tension in her spine was beginning to pulse. She stared at the carpet, counting the repeating triangles in the pattern. A small coping mechanism. 1, 2, 3. Don't look up. But she heard the voice. Lynette again. Clipped, curt, a different tone now. "Ma'am, I need you to step further back. You're obstructing the flow." Imani looked up. "I'm not in anyone's way," she said evenly. "I'm asking you, politely," Lynette replied. "I've already explained. There's an issue with your ticket. If you can't comply, I'll need to escalate this." Imani didn't move. "Would you like me to call security?" Lynette added, slightly louder. That did it. Heads turned. A few passengers slowed their walk. A man in a gray blazer stopped mid-step, looked at Imani, then back at Lynette. The word security hung in the air like smoke. Imani swallowed hard. The heat returned to her face. Her fingers clenched around the strap of her bag. There was no aggression in her posture, no disruption, just a refusal to shrink. But Lynette was performing. She was making a scene now, loud enough for others to hear. She was manufacturing disorder where there was none, and the moment she invoked security, she flipped the narrative. Imani wasn't a passenger anymore. She was a problem. The judgment was instant. A woman clutched her purse a little tighter. A teenager in a hoodie put his AirPods back in. The silent stories began forming in their heads. Late boarding, a difficult customer, maybe a fake ticket. Imani didn't argue. She stepped farther back, her hands shaking. Her phone was still recording. In the far corner, a man in his 20s, with a backpack slung low on one shoulder, quietly raised his own phone and started recording video. He didn't say a word. just watched, the lens blinking slowly as it caught everything. Imani didn't notice him. She closed her eyes briefly. Her breath moved shallow in her chest. It wasn't just about being denied boarding. It was the public nature of it. The suggestion that she was fraudulent, unworthy, suspicious. She had experienced microaggressions before, many. She had walked into rooms where no one expected her to be the lead scientist. She had been mistaken for the assistant, the intern, the help, but this was different. This was weaponized authority. She thought of her dissertation defense. The moment she stood at the podium, explaining years of environmental fieldwork and statistical modeling, the feeling of being seen, of being heard. That feeling had evaporated now, replaced with invisibility again, or worse, visibility distorted through the wrong lens. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Boarding was nearly complete. She checked the departure board, final call flashing in orange letters. Still, no one came to her. Still. Lynette stood at the front with her back turned, laughing at something another attendant said, and then the energy shifted. It was subtle at first. A quiet alert sounded on the gate computer. Lynette glanced at the screen, paused, frowned. Another alert? She tapped something, then picked up the red phone to her left. Her voice dropped, muffled by the receiver. Imani didn't hear what was said, but moments later, 2 men in suits approached the gate. One was tall, sharp-featured, with a federal badge clipped visibly to his coat. The other wore a dark blue lanyard with a Stratus Atlantic logo. Both looked serious. Lynette straightened immediately. Her posture changed. The man with the badge spoke first. "We're looking for Imani Graves." Lynette's mouth opened, but before she could respond, the airline rep stepped forward and said, "She's over there, sir." Both men turned. Imani blinked. The taller one gave her a small nod. "Miss Graves, I'm Agent Holloway with the Department of Transportation. Would you come with us for a moment?" Please, Imani didn't speak. She just walked forward, her steps slow but steady. As she passed the gate, Lynette avoided eye contact. The airline manager had stepped back entirely, as if distancing himself from what was unfolding. They led her down a side hallway, away from the gate area. The hallway was quiet. Linoleum floors, white walls, a supply cart halfway down the corridor. Imani's heart thudded in her ears. Agent Holloway stopped, turned to her gently. "Your father is en route. Until then, I've been asked to escort you to the secure lounge and ensure you're treated with respect. Is that okay?" Imani stared at him. She nodded. Something had shifted. The fracture had been made, but the reckoning was on its way. The lounge was quiet. Too quiet. It wasn't the luxury kind with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, just a spare administrative room with a window that looked out onto the tarmac. There was a single couch, a glass coffee table, and a television mounted high on the wall, muted and playing a weather channel. Imani sat alone, her coat folded neatly beside her. She had been offered water, which she accepted with a polite nod. Her phone was still in her lap, screen dark. The recorder app had run for nearly an hour before she tapped stop and saved the file with trembling fingers. She stared out the window. A marshaller in a high-vis vest guided a plane into position. The glowing batons in his hands moved slowly, methodically. The aircraft obeyed without question. Her body was still. Her thoughts were not. She should have said more, should have pushed harder, shouldn't have stepped back. And yet, she knew why she had. Because the moment you're labeled difficult, the narrative slips away from you. Because the moment your voice raises, even slightly, it becomes the focus, not the injustice. Because being black and calm is an act of defense. She leaned forward and rested her elbows on her knees. Her chest felt tight, not from panic, but from the weight of memory. This moment wasn't isolated. It had roots, generations of roots. Her grandmother had been a nurse in Baton Rouge during segregation. She had once told Imani, with a sad smile, "They never let us forget our place." So I made mine anyway. Imani had always remembered that. She had made her place too, in labs, in conferences, in long nights writing code for environmental impact simulations. In years of defending her right to be both brilliant and black in spaces not built to see her as both, she had thought this trip would be different. A flight to mark the closing of one chapter and the beginning of something new. Instead, she found herself back in familiar terrain, misjudged, dismissed, reduced. The door opened softly. She looked up. Victor Graves stepped inside. The air seemed to still around him. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, coat still buttoned. His face was unreadable, but his eyes went straight to her, a quiet assessment, not of danger, of damage. "Hey, baby girl," he said. Imani tried to speak. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her throat tightened, and to her surprise, tears sprang to her eyes. She hadn't cried during the confrontation, hadn't cried when told to stand aside, hadn't cried when Lynette had threatened security, but now, seeing her father's face, steady and strong, something cracked. He crossed the room in 2 long steps and wrapped her in his arms. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was grounding. She inhaled the familiar scent of his cologne, cedar and citrus. Safety. "I'm okay," she murmured into his chest. "I know," he said, "but you don't have to be right now." They sat down together. He didn't rush her. He waited, letting the silence settle between them until her breathing steadied. He looked over at her. "Do you want to tell me everything? Or do you want me to start?" Imani exhaled slowly. "She told me I was in the wrong line, that my past didn't scan. She never even tried, just looked at me and assumed I didn't belong." Victor nodded once. He didn't take notes, didn't interrupt. She made me stand to the side. Then she threatened to call security, loud enough for everyone to hear. She paused. I wasn't loud. I didn't argue. I just stood there. It was like, no matter what I did, I was still seen as a threat. She rubbed the back of her neck, and I hate that it worked, that it got under my skin, that I felt like maybe I should have dressed differently, said something smarter, stood taller. Victor reached over and took her hand. "Imani, none of this happened because of what you did. It happened because of what she believed when she saw you." He looked her in the eye. "She saw your skin before she saw your name. She saw your age before she saw your seat. She saw your calm as defiance and your presence as a problem. That is not your burden to fix." She looked away. A tear slid down her cheek. "I know." A knock on the door interrupted them. Victor stood. A man in a blue blazer and striped tie stepped in. Mid-40s, nervous energy. "Mr. Graves, I'm Calvin Bruckner, Station Operations Manager. I've been informed of the situation, and I just want to say how sorry we are." Victor held up a hand. "Save it," he said evenly. "I'm not interested in a rehearsed apology. I want the scan logs, the video surveillance, and a list of every complaint filed in the last 2 years regarding gate staff behavior at this terminal. Calvin blinked. I can get that, but some of that's under review protocol. I'd need upper clearance. Victor pulled out a slim black folder, flipped it open. A federal badge gleamed under the overhead light. Then consider this your clearance. Calvin swallowed. I'll get right on it. He backed out of the room quickly. Imani watched him go. Her voice was quiet. Do you think anything will actually change? Victor sat again. Only if we push hard enough and smart enough. She looked down. There's a part of me that wanted to yell, to call her out in front of everyone, to demand they see me. And there's another part that just wanted to leave, to let her win, to walk away before it got worse. Victor nodded. Both of those reactions are valid. You're human. But what you did was the hardest thing. What's that? You stood your ground, without giving them what they wanted. Imani leaned back against the couch, the exhaustion finally creeping into her limbs. Victor reached into his inner jacket pocket and handed her something, a printed copy of her boarding pass. Seat 1A. It's still yours. She looked at it. I don't want their champagne or their forced apology. Then don't take it for them, he said. Take it for yourself. There was a long pause. Then Imani said, Will you sit with me for a few more minutes? Of course, he replied. They sat side by side, 2 generations, the weight of history between them, but also the force of resistance, of presence, of staying outside. A new plane taxied into view. Its wheels touched down softly on the illuminated runway, the friction of descent melting into momentum. Imani watched it and whispered, more to herself than anyone else, I don't want to feel small, not anymore. Victor didn't respond. He didn't have to. The flight was no longer just about Copenhagen. It was about reclaiming altitude. By the time Victor Graves stepped into the operations control room of Stratus Atlantic's Houston hub, the temperature of the entire terminal had shifted. The room was dim, humming with low server fans and bright monitors displaying arrival maps, gate assignments, weather radar, and dispatch logs. It was the brain of the airport's movements. Inside. A handful of flight coordinators looked up when Victor entered. Most didn't know who he was, but the posture of the 2 managers flanking him said everything. He carried no briefcase. He didn't raise his voice, but the badge clipped to his belt, glinting silver and deep blue under the fluorescence, spoke volumes. Victor looked over the shoulder of a supervisor tapping nervously on a keyboard. I want the scan logs for Flight 88. Boarding began at 6:55 p.m. I need time-stamped entries, particularly anything regarding Seat 1A. Yes, sir, the man replied. His fingers flew. The logs appeared. Each first-class passenger showed up clearly. Green confirmation check marks, boarding time, seat number. Victor narrowed his eyes. Where's the entry for Imani Graves? The man hesitated. There isn't one. Victor leaned in. No rejection notice, no scan error, just nothing. Yes, sir. Meaning her boarding pass was never scanned, not attempted, not even rejected. She never even made it into the system. Victor stepped back. His hands were steady, but his jaw had tightened. He pulled out his phone. Jim, he said after the first ring. Pull the full surveillance feed for Gate C17 between 6:45 and 7:15 p.m. Archive it immediately. I want original footage, not the auto-compressed version. A pause. Yes, start the FAA complaint documentation now. Title it C-17 Discrimination Event Graves Case. I'll submit full report later. This is going under Category 5 escalation." He hung up, eyes still on the monitor. Across the room, Calvin Bruckner entered, slightly breathless. "Mr. Graves, I've just reviewed the situation myself. Obviously, there's been a terrible mistake and we deeply regret Victor turned—" "This wasn't a mistake," he said coldly. Bruckner froze. Victor walked toward him slowly, deliberately. His voice was calm, but cut like glass. "Mistakes involve system errors, glitches, miscommunications. What happened to my daughter was not a system failure. It was a personal choice made by an empowered staff member who looked her up and down and decided she didn't belong." Bruckner looked around, searching for a verbal foothold. "I understand how this looks, but if you'll allow us to handle it internally—" "No," Victor said. Bruckner blinked. Victor took another step forward. "You don't get to file this under guest relations and offer a voucher. You don't get to sweep it behind HR protocol and sensitivity training. This incident involved a federal violation of anti-discrimination protections under the Civil Aviation Access Statute, and I will be initiating a full audit into your staff conduct records, your complaint handling protocols, and your boarding priority training standards across all domestic hubs." Bruckner's color began to drain. Victor wasn't finished. "I've already contacted the Department of Transportation. An internal equity panel will be reviewing all reported gate conflicts from the past 3 years. That includes any situation where a person of color was flagged for ticket verification while others were not. We'll be looking for patterns. I have reason to believe we'll find them." Bruckner swallowed. "Sir, we will cooperate with any investigation. Absolutely." Victor gave a single slow nod. "I suggest you begin by placing Ms. Rowe on administrative leave immediately."